Hi, my name is Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to move on from my general summary of Cummings' press conference yesterday and consider if it will have done what he needs. Now, you may think not, as it was a complete howler, but it's not really that straightforward. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So let's be clear about what Cummings was trying to accomplish in his press conference. Although it was aimed at the general public, it was not really intended to get the public on side as such. He's not a politician, he doesn't care about public opinion. In addition, the public can do nothing to his ambitions until 2024, by which time he will have hoped to have completed his restructuring of British government, the constitution and the civil service in his own dystopian image. Now, you can look at the situation and go, well, Cummings may not care about this, but surely Conservative MPs care about it. Yes, they do, but they don't necessarily understand what will and will not get them elected. The other thing is that Cummings wasn't trying to get the media on side as well, just as well, really, because he absolutely didn't. He spent the entire hour of the press conference trashing the media that were asking him questions. There's only one group of people that have the power to stop him at the moment, and that's Conservative backbenchers. And given that they'd have opposition support, it would only take about 50 of them to force Boris Johnson's hand and get rid of Cummings and send him back to Durham permanently. The problem is that Tory MPs, like all MPs, have been inundated with an unprecedented level of complaints from their constituents. This, in combination with the resurgent Labour Party, would create a major headache for any Tory MP in the next general election, and particularly for those in marginal or under pressure seats. And yes, that is years away. And yes, as people keep saying, the public do forget things very easily, very quickly. But you have to remember what the source of this public anger is. It's not about Dominic Cummings breaking the rules. Senior MPs break the rules all the time. Cabinet ministers break the rules all the time. People don't care. People are apathetic. You know, Dominic Cummings is still technically under investigation for criminal behaviour during the Brexit referendum. Though to all intents and purposes, the government have leaned on the National Crime Agency to proceed extremely slowly with that. What people are angry about is that they've had loved ones pass away alone. They couldn't see them before they died to tell them face to face that they loved them. Some couldn't even attend funerals because of the limited numbers allowed at services. And when all of this heartache was going on, in the interests of saving lives, Dominic Cummings was driving to a beauty spot to celebrate his wife's birthday. And that sort of anger isn't going to abate. You know, in 4 years' time, those loved ones will have still died alone. And the relatives and friends of those people will still feel bad about that. And the people, you know, will not forget that in 4 years' time. They'll be reminded. And thanks to Johnson's cowardice in keeping Cummings in place, when the next general election comes up, you can bet your ass that all political opponents of the Tories will drag up every supportive message of Cummings' law breaking that every single MP made. And that won't just be cabinet ministers, who will surely have to be removed as liabilities, especially Boris Johnson himself, but local MPs as well, who will have stood behind him and stuck two fingers up at the British public. And remember, Boris Johnson won his large majority on the back of traditional Labour seats. Those seats were always going to be under pressure anyway come 2024, because they only just sneaked them this time round. The fact that Keir Starmer is running rings around Johnson, and will certainly continue to do so, puts even more pressure on them if he's still around at the time. Now remember, those seats were not lost because a load of people switched from voting Labour to voting Tory. That did happen in some seats, but not most. In most, it was just because a lot of Labour voters stayed at home. They didn't go out to vote at all. These Labour voters are unlikely to stay at home again with Starmer in charge. And these MPs would be foolish to do anything publicly to stand against, you know, the public view that Cummings should go, that he broke the rules. I heard a media correspondent say that these MPs owed their seats to Dominic Cummings, so perhaps they'd like to support him. This is not true. And if they think they owe their seats to Cummings, they weren't paying attention. Let's look at what Cummings has actually done for them. First of all, it was Dominic Cummings that orchestrated the campaign to try and prorogue Parliament and so on and so forth, which resulted in getting rid of a lot of moderate Tory MPs because of their opposition to his methods in running roughshod over parliamentary sovereignty. So what that means is that when they do have to oust Johnson, and they are going to have to this Parliament, they don't really have an obvious candidate to turn to, because Dominic Cummings has ensured that their talent pool left the parliamentary party. The second thing is that Cummings is responsible for the government's COVID strategy, a strategy that has put an unwelcome spotlight on just how much the Tories have failed the NHS, has killed tens of thousands of Britons so far, leaving hundreds of thousands of mourning friends and relatives, and which has given Labour easy ways to attack the Tories without even needing to get party political. There's nothing to be thankful for there. And third, he's now set himself up as above the law in the eyes of the public. This forces all Tory MPs to make a public stand. On controversial issues, career politicians on the backbenchers tend to try and keep quiet if the party is not in alignment with the public mood. And, an example of my girlfriend's arsehole of an MP, Andrew Percy. So she lives in an agricultural area. It's farms all around here. And Percy failed to vote on the changes to the agriculture bill. His party wanted him to vote for it, but the bill would devastate the local economy. The purpose of this change would be to allow Americans to undercut British farmers. So obviously he couldn't do that. He doesn't want anyone bringing that up at the next election. But he also didn't have the backbone to vote against it. Even though some other Tory MPs did, he wouldn't have been on his own. So he just abstained. Now, this generated a lot of local fury. It was all over social media, the local social media groups, they're absolutely furious at him. And perhaps this will bite him on the arse when local farms start to go under, because again, that's going to be the issue. In theory, this is the sort of thing that could blow over and people will have forgotten about. But if farms go under, if local businesses go under, they'll have still gone under by then. But it is an example of how backbenchers like to run for cover. He didn't want to support the bill, but he was too afraid of his own leadership to oppose it. But on the Cummings issue, they can't just be neutral on it. For a start, there is no vote in Parliament to abstain on. So many constituents, writing into these MPs, and a response has to be given. They have to either publicly support or oppose Cummings's behaviour. They either have to go along the line of he did nothing wrong, or they have to say, do you know what, he clearly did do something wrong. They have to choose a hill to potentially die on. And quite frankly, if I were a Tory MP only interested in my own seat, I would take the following position. 1, I would publicly say that Cummings broke the rules. I wouldn't even wait. I would say, look, it's quite obvious he broke the rules. And in fact, actually, after that press conference, it's clear he broke even more rules than even I knew about. He should have admitted it and he should have apologised. And I'm as angry as anyone else who's behaved in this way. And you can safely say that because if I'm just a backbencher, I have no power to do anything. However, I would also privately tell Boris Johnson or the whips or anyone else amongst the leadership of the party that I won't be actively pushing for Cummings to go unless I face overwhelming public pressure to do so. But I may advise the Prime Minister that it would be in the party's best interest to get rid of him. And then I would hope that my constituents accept my objections and don't give me a hard time over it. I'd then just get ready to drop Boris Johnson at some convenient time in a year or two, dump all the blame on him, and get in a new leader who can then be absolved of any of the crap that Johnson will be publicly made responsible for. Works every time. But the thing is, not all MPs understand politics. And it might sound a strange thing to say, but I am reminded of the fact that, after the December's general election, I think we had an unprecedented number of new MPs, new to Parliament. And a lot of them were confused. That they went there, they were in Commons debates, and they were confused as to why people were standing up. Now, I was frankly shocked at that revelation because you expect them not to know some of the intricacies of parliamentary procedure. But what that showed was that they'd never even watched a parliamentary debate in their lives. These are people who wanted to stand to become an MP and became an MP. and they've never actually watched an MP at work, and it's on the telly. Utterly clueless. So, anyway, the key thing is, what did MPs think about Cummings' press conference? Now, none of the ones who had publicly called for his sacking changed their minds. At this point at which I'm doing this anyway, which is on the Tuesday morning. So he didn't win those over, but they only numbered 20. We know that there were about 200 MPs who were not happy and wanted Johnson to sack Cummings, but most of them, like I say, are keeping their heads down and just waiting to see which way the political wind blows. And they will have been waiting to see what the leadership did about it. Now, a lot of MPs did send out cut and pasted messages on social media from the Whip's office, who of course will have got that message from Dominic Cummings. They are likely to regret this, given the newspaper coverage today is actually worse than yesterday. The Sun and the Express are still covering for Cummings, but they, as far as I can tell, are the only ones now. And it was like yesterday the response was more muted. The only right-wing newspaper that really properly savaged him was the Daily Mail. The Telegraph and the Times were critical, but if you looked at the headlines, you might be forgiven for thinking not. You'd have to read the article. I think that was because what they were having to do was to attack the Prime Minister. They were attacking Boris Johnson for his weakness in allowing Cummings to stay on. Whereas this time, the attacks were on Dominic Cummings himself. He was the one in the firing line, and they have no objections to taking that bell end down. So I think that for now, most Tory MPs will still try and keep their heads down for a day or two and see if there's been a shift in public opinion. A lot of those MPs are desperate not to go against the leadership, but they also can't afford to go against public opinion with something like this that will be remembered. So if you want to give them a little insight into that, and you live in the UK, don't forget to email your MP. And if you've already done so, as I have, I'm not saying spam them, I'm not going to spam mine. But perhaps it might be worth just letting them know with another email that you've watched the Dominic Cummings press conference and you've only seen him admit to even more law breaking than we knew about beforehand, and you are certainly not swayed by that. But we will see by the end of the week. There's going to come a point where MPs, of course, have to start taking a stand. Until then, I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.